onthehorn.com.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to News Talk Tonight. I'm Dave Moore, your host. We are brought to you by Amazon.com, Gateway Financial Group, Sandits Travel, Sherpa Technologies, Budwitz and Meyerjack CPAs, Deepwater Seafood of Avon, and CentralCTDental.com. We have a slight divergence from our normal political discussions, but basically, my thought is, hey, some of the business stuff that's coming out now is actually going to have an impact on the elections, and particularly the local elections. So we will be discussing, among other things, how Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield has made a rate hike request. And it's interesting the percentage of increase that they're asking for. More on that in a little bit. Also, CBIA just recently published a survey of Connecticut businesses that indicate that businesses are still struggling, but almost half are still hiring. The question is, can they hire someone? We'll also talk about politics because I like to do that. The Senate race is definitively heating up, and we'll also have a little cleanup discussion after a failed congressional bid. And I will close with some thoughts on the anniversary today. As many of you hopefully already know, today is the 11th anniversary of the attacks in Washington and New York and the plane downing in Pennsylvania. I will have a few notes that will be slightly politically related. Shock, shock, surprise, surprise. First up, however, is the Anthem request. Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield has submitted a rate increase request for 2 programs to the state insurance department that could affect 95,000 insureds. The requested increase for the small group rates of 13.8%, impacting 65,000 employees, was made on August 15th. And the additional request was made for individual policy rates of 14.6%, impacting 30,000 insureds, on August 31st. The rate increase requests have not sparked the kind of outrage that resulted in their 20% request made back in 2011. The insurance department's actuaries will review both requests and the rationale behind them before the department makes a final decision on the request. Unlike previous years, the rate increase requests are not going to automatically be granted. And Anthem is not the only insurance company that has been requesting double-digit rate increases. Aetna has requested a 14% rate increase back in May, but the department only approved a 12.6% increase. Oxford Health Plans sought an 8.7% increase for about 13,335 policyholders in its small group plan, but the department only allowed a 7.4 to 8.4% increase, finding that the projected costs were, quote, not in line with what the company is currently experiencing, and disapproved of the request as submitted, end quote. Connecticut is seeking a 13.5% increase for its 52,000 small group plan members. I should note that all of the stories that I'm relating tonight can be found at ctnewsjunkie.com. This particular story was written by Christine Stewart. The rate increase requests are not surprising in and of themselves. What is surprising is the amount of the increases. A recent bill passed by the legislature called for public hearings on increases over 10%, but that bill was vetoed by Governor Daniel P. Malloy, who indicated that it would add to the cost of running the insurance department. The department has voluntarily agreed to hold public hearings for rate increases requested over 15%. Now, you'll note all of the rate increase requests are below 15%, which means that they are avoiding the voluntary prescription for a public hearing. The Uh, State healthcare advocate Victoria Veltri said last year the rate increases remained at 9.8% or 9.9% and 10%. What caught her eye was the higher double-digit rate increase requests. Veltri has no doubt that the department will be thorough in its review of the requests, but they're also only going to be working with numbers that are provided to them by the insurance companies. But she would like to know what, if anything, the insurance companies have done to keep medical costs down, such as negotiating with the doctors, the hospitals, and other providers. Anthem, in its request, indicated that the primary driver for the rate increase request has been the rising medical costs. Veltri said that buying health insurance is not like buying a car, where you can do in-depth research on the car and can negotiate the price of the car, whereas there is no negotiation for health plan costs. Veltri also noted that consumers have the ability to weigh in on the rate increase requests in writing through the insurance department's website. Now, as many of you know, the Healthcare Reform Act, affectionately referred to as Obamacare, went a long ways towards trying to diffuse the ability for medical costs to increase considerably. And in fact, one of the main arguments was for the passage of this federal act was that there was going to be an expectation that the insurance companies would be doing a better job of negotiating down the medical costs. This has not really proven to be true. In our second story, a survey of 580 Connecticut businesses published by the Connecticut Business and Industry Association found that many are still struggling in a post-recession economy. The story also by Christine Stewart. The survey found that the business profitability had not rebounded to pre-recession levels, but continues on a slight upward trajectory. 59% of the businesses recorded a net profit in 2011, and 57% expect a profit in 2012. The survey also found that despite the fact that many companies have a negative view of Connecticut as a place to operate, the percentage of companies looking to relocate to another state in the next 5 years is down 18% from last year. However, concerns about Connecticut's economy ranked second for businesses, followed by tax increases. Manufacturing seems to be rebounding, according to the survey. Nearly two-thirds of manufacturers recorded a net profit in 2011, and 66% expect a profit in 2012. Manufacturers also had fewer net losses. 13% saw a net loss in 2011, and 7% expect a net loss in 2012. Another 23% broke even in 2011, and 28% expect to break even in 2012. So if you want to run a business in Connecticut, you probably should be a manufacturer. Of all the different types of businesses surveyed, 43% anticipated hiring full-time workers in 2012. Finding workers to fill those jobs, however, is still a concern, especially in light of the large number of baby boomers in the workforce. About 47% of businesses in the survey reported difficulty in finding qualified workers. Education reform recently enacted and precision machine training in the community and technological schools may help address the talent shortage, but it may be too little too late. Nearly 25% of manufacturers surveyed expect that 10% of their workforce will retire within the next 5 years, and half of those anticipate 20% of their workforce to retire in the same period. The survey also reflected an improvement in the lending climate and access to capital. Half of all businesses surveyed introduced a new product or service in the last 12 months, and more than half plan to do so over the next 12 months, and only 2% rank credit availability as their top concern. So basically, the survey, which was conducted by an entity that is very pro business, is saying that things in general seem to be improving, although nowhere near what everybody would like. And given the fact that Connecticut still has an unemployment rate of over 8%, and that's not including the folks that have dropped off because they've been unemployed for so long and or have stopped trying to get reemployed, it's still a shaky economy. And it is still a situation that cries out for a remedy both on the local and federal level. Getting to my favorite topic, politics. It appears as though in the Senate race that there is a shift in emphasis amongst both of the campaigns. It appears as though the Democratic contender, Representative Chris Murphy, who is currently the representative from the 5th Congressional District, is fairly concerned. In fact, as noted last week, there was a sort of SOS put out to the folks who were attending the national convention for the Democrats. And partly as a result of the Murphy SOS, there were about 250 volunteers who were called basically a brigade of liberal city and suburban door knockers descending on New Haven as an SOS bulletin for the future of the U.S. Senate arrived home from Charlotte. The volunteers basically showed up primarily from a group called the Hilltop Brigade to the Eli Whitney Museum Sunday for a rally and a strategy session for the campaign of Chris Murphy. As many of you hopefully know, Murphy is running against Linda McMahon for the seat that is being vacated by Senator Joseph Lieberman. Also, an indication of how things are heating up, the McMahon campaign has filed a complaint against Representative Murphy. In a story reported by Christine Stewart, unhappy with how the media is covering Chris Murphy's brush with foreclosure and failure to pay his property taxes and rent, Linda McMahon brought her story to the Office of Congressional Ethics Sunday. McMahon is the Republican running against Murphy in the U.S. Senate race. The two are locked in a too-close-to-call race for the seat. The complaint was filed by McMahon's campaign manager, Corey Bliss, and it alleges that Murphy received a preferential treatment from Webster Bank when they agreed to give him a 4.9% interest rate on a $43,000 home equity line of credit in 2008. Bliss noted that the interest rate was extended to Murphy after he had defaulted on his 2007 mortgage, which was sold by Webster to Chase Home Finance. Bliss also noted that it was after a tax lien had been placed on his home in 2005 for paying his property taxes. But the complaint, which was given by the McMahon campaign to Politico earlier Sunday afternoon, may be more of a publicity stunt, since the Office of Congressional Ethics can't forward the complaint to the Office of House Ethics 60 days before the election. Oops. Well, nonetheless, they are going forward saying that no average American would have been able to secure a loan as much as Congressman Murphy's. Even borrowers in good standing would have had trouble doing so. Webster Bank has issued a statement both on Friday and Saturday saying that Murphy was not given preferential treatment, that the going rate at that point in time was 3.99%, 1 percentage point higher than what they gave Murphy, and that there were no special exceptions that were granted as far as the underwriting of that particular loan was concerned. It is true that folks that have a foreclosure action on their credit rating and folks that are dealing with tax liens that may or may not be reported on their credit rating would probably have a harder time getting a loan, period, let alone a loan that was at perhaps 1% above what the going rate was. Nonetheless, the McMahon campaign pointed out that Representative Murphy also happens to sit on the House Finance Committee, and Webster Bank is somewhat beholden to the House Finance Committee. All good points. The thing is, gee, if this was a real complaint, couldn't have and shouldn't have been made sooner. Which all gets to the next little story of how it's going to get personal and it's going to get nasty. By Hugh McQuaid, also from CT News Junkie. Linda McMahon is getting personal, and it may be working. So said a University of Connecticut political science professor about the latest McMahon campaign against Democrat Chris Murphy for the Connecticut open U.S. Senate seat. McMahon, who's vying against Representative Murphy for retiring Senator Lieberman's seat, ran an unsuccessful bid for U.S. Senate in 2010. The former wrestling CEO lost that race to former Attorney General Richard Blumenthal by over 100,000 votes. UConn political science professor Vincent Moscadarelli, that's easy to say, said that experience is helping her now. One of the differences between this time and the last time is that she's done this before. And in many ways, you can argue she's never stopped, Moscadelli said. It would be surprising if she weren't running a stronger campaign. She's going to take advantage of every opportunity to personalize this race, he said, and Murphy wants the race reduced to a Democrat running against a Republican. It should be noted that in most of McMahon's ads, both print as well as what you see on TV, you don't see any mention of the fact that she is the Republican running for the office. It's just Linda McMahon. The Democrats' strategy has rested in part on trying to tie McMahon to the positions of the National Republicans. On Monday, the focus was on women's reproductive health. The Murphy campaign has issued a press release criticizing McMahon for indicating that she would support an amendment that allows employers to choose not to provide insurance policies covering free contraception. Known as the Blunt Amendment, the amendment would deny women access to birth control and basic health care services like mammograms and cervical cancer screenings from their employers, and Linda McMahon supports it, Murphy's campaign spokeswoman Taylor Lavender said. McMahon says she's pro-choice, but she's not. Her support for the Blunt Amendment would cut off access to critical, non-controversial health services for tens of thousands of women in Connecticut. Now you can see why I led off with the health insurance situation. McMahon has said that the whole issue seemed to be focused on contraception when she believes that it was really an issue about the First Amendment. Todd Abrahando, McMahon's spokesman, said that voters are more concerned with the economy and putting food on the tables than they are about the Blunt Amendment or abortion. Most don't even know what the amendment is, he said. I think that Democrats are extremely concerned because they're looking at a race that they thought was in the bag, and they're beginning to understand that people like what they see in Linda McMahon, said Abrahano. On August 28th, a Quinnipiac poll found that voters were indeed more concerned about the economy than women's reproductive rights. 58% of likely voters said that the economy would be an extremely important factor in their vote for president. Meanwhile, 31% said that women's reproductive health issues would be extremely important. However, despite the gap in the poll, Moscardelli said that focusing on social issues may be an effective campaign strategy for Democrats, at least in Connecticut. There's no single issue more important than the economy in determining an election, but it exists within a broader context, he said. The struggling economy may hurt President Barack Obama, but by extension, lower ticket Democrats like Murphy. But it doesn't change the basic political leaning of Connecticut, which is blue, said Moscardelli. And a perceived, quote, war on women, end quote, could turn out to be an effective device for mobilizing the Democratic base in Connecticut. Now, as a brief aside, it's a good idea for both McMahon and Murphy to energize their base. You want to be sure that the Democratic voters who are likely to vote actually get out to the polls. Just like McMahon wants to be sure that Republican voters who are likely to vote actually get out to the polls. The fact that Moscardelli doesn't really touch on, and something that has been touched on time and again here, is that the majority of voters in Connecticut are not Republican, nor are they Democratic. They're unaffiliated. So you have a broad spectrum of what, for lack of a better term, would be independent voters who you want to reach in the next 55 or so days. Because those are the folks that are actually going to swing the election one way or the other, whether it's on the presidential level, the senatorial level, or the congressional level. The fact that there was this ethics complaint filed by McMahon's campaign, according to Moscardelli, said, yeah, you have the implication of the sweetheart deal from Webster, and that is kind of sort of bad news for a candidate who's struggling to define himself to the voters before McMahon does. He did not want to be talking about his mortgage and missed rent payments after the Democratic convention, Moscardelli said. Without a doubt, it knocked him off track. However, Moscardelli said that the Murphy campaign responded well by getting Webster Bank to issue a statement denying the allegations that the candidate got any sort of special treatment. Moscardelli said that it is too soon in the race to make a prediction about how things will turn out in November. He said the Connecticut Senate open seat will take on enormous significance for Democrats looking to retain control of the chamber, and enormous significance to the Republicans who are looking to take it. For that reason, it is likely that the state will see a huge influx of money coming from third-party donors, organizations like super PACs. That could be good news for Murphy, whose campaign has struggled to compete with McMahon's largely self-funded campaign, but it could also present problems for the candidate, he said. The problem is that you can quickly lose control of your message when the message is being dictated in part by third-party groups. While McMahon has the money to run ads and mailers to offset any unwanted shifts in the campaign narrative, Murphy could find himself boxed in by them, he said. With the stakes so high, Moscardelli predicted that the race would likely get messy before November. It's going to get personal, and it's going to get nasty. There's no question, although I will note from my own observations that the attack ads have been playing back and forth on TV. Today, however, I heard for the first time a non-attack ad by Linda McMahon, which indicates to me that McMahon is responding to some of the narrative that's being offered by the quote-unquote experts. And she is doing her best to really identify herself. The ad in particular notes how she had filed for bankruptcy, notes that she and Vince had lost their home, that she understands what it's like to be poor, that she understands what it's like to worry about putting food on the table. A very effective ad, and it comes across neatly. And there is no hint of an attack. There's no mention of the Democrats. You're on.
That ad's been on for quite a while. That was on long before she got the nod from the party. I've seen that for a couple of months now. But it definitely speaks to everything.
This was on the radio.
Oh, it's basically, it must be the audio of one of the ones
It's
that's on
gotta be.
television, because I've seen that ad before.
It's the first time that I've actually heard it on the radio
That's interesting.
in months.
Okay.
Because yes, I did see the actual TV ad.
Yeah, because it shows her and Vince and the kids in their home when they were much younger. So, yeah, I've never heard it on the radio, though, so that's interesting. And where are they spending their money? What format are we talking?
That's a very good question. You'll note that I will note that this particular ad was at the end of their afternoon drive time, which is when former Governor Rowland is doing his radio's show.
Okay.
So you're definitely, as far as TIC is concerned, they're a more conservative slant as far as their afternoon shows are concerned. You've got Rush Limbaugh and then you've got Governor Rowland. Both hardcore Republicans. Nonetheless, you're also dealing with a time frame when more people are likely to be tuning in. You've got the insurance types that are getting out of work.
Everybody's getting out of work.
Because this was around 4:30.
Oh, yeah. They're either sitting at my bar or driving home.
And you're dealing with a wider range of folk than you would be from the earlier show premise,
Definitely.
if you will. And TIC's a 50,000 watt flamethrower.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be heard through most of the state. There's no question that the McMahon campaign has been a lot smarter in how they have presented their candidate in various ads. What is interesting, however, is that they have yet to have their campaign look at the possibility of a debate or allowing their candidate to actually field questions from reporters on a live basis.
Somebody asked me about that the other day. It was my dad, and he said, well, is she going to be on the show? And I said, to my knowledge, she does not do interviews. I haven't heard one yet.
She has steadfastly refused to come on air with anyone. We have asked. Mm-hmm. We've been politely put off. And that's not a great shock or surprise. The weakness that Linda McMahon has is that she is not one of the greatest extemporaneous thinkers or speakers. She doesn't do well on her feet. Okay. And has a greater chance of a misstep. And all you have to do is look at the 2010 campaign to solidify that particular impression. Okay. Because the times that she did talk to the editorial boards, the times that she did talk to TV producers and or reporters were not great times for her campaign.
Okay.
More often than not, she was putting her foot in her mouth. And Senator Blumenthal was able to capitalize on that. Murphy is a much stronger extemporaneous speaker. He is a lawyer by training. He has also been sitting in Congress for the last 6 years. So he's kind of gotten used to the podium and to being able to field questions.
So there are no debates scheduled for the two?
9 have been offered. None have been scheduled.
I don't know how you don't do that. You have to.
You would think.
And honestly, if I'm Murphy's campaign, I put it out there that she doesn't want to debate me. I sing and I go to the highest mountain and scream at the top of my lungs.
But you wouldn't talk to an empty chair, now would you?
Maybe. What do you think?
You know, at one point in time, that was tried back in 2010, where a candidate would have his or her opponent's cutout.
Nice. I like
standing
that.
there.
I like that.
Okay. And my opponent says, lots of dead air. Yeah. That's a wonderful shtick that maybe works once. Maybe you do it twice, but no more than that. Otherwise, people get really tired of, okay, you're hitting us over the head
Right.
enough.
Right.
Folks have complained long and loud about the negative campaigning. The problem is
Me included.
me, and I will add myself to that long list. The unfortunate thing is, according to results, negative campaigning works.
Okay.
It does put a frame around a candidate, whether the candidate likes it or not, and it begins to narrow the focus of the candidate. Whether the candidate can fight against that or not effectively is another matter.
Right.
Thus far, you have seen punch and counterpunch by the McMahon and Murphy campaigns. Whether they've truly been effective or not, particularly when both campaigns in their most recent attack ads were deemed by the fact checkers to be not so accurate. For instance,
Fact checkers be damned is what I was told 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, well, not so much.
That's what I was told 2 weeks ago.
The Murphy campaign indicated that hundreds of jobs went overseas thanks to Linda McMahon. That wasn't entirely accurate because what they were relying on was the international wrestling stuff that was happening.
I was kind of wondering where all that came from because, okay, maybe they go overseas every couple of months and do a show in England, but they come back, though.
You have, for instance, wrestling bouts, if they can be called that, in Japan.
Yep.
In England.
Yep.
In Germany.
Mexico, Germany,
Mexico.
Spain.
Yep.
All over the world.
So it's there's clearly international income coming in to the WWE, but it's not at the expense of American jobs.
No.
Therein lies the inaccuracy. On the McMahon side, the inaccuracy was he missed 80% of his meetings. Well, no. In actual fact, he missed about 80% of committee meetings in his first term. That percentage has come down remarkably in the second and the third term. And as Murphy pointed out, he made 97% of the voting, whether it was for committees or on the House floor itself. 90% of the time he was there, and not just voting present, which is something that I learned in the last 2 years you can do.
Yep.
If you don't want to formally abstain, you just say, present, I'm here, hi. Yeah,
well, that goes good for you, though, so.
It can. It can. But no, Murphy was actually voting yay or nay. Well,
what matters more to you as the person who's doing this show or anybody? What matters more to you? Going to committee meetings or being there when the actual vote is taken?
It matters to me more that they're voting.
Absolutely.
That they are either putting themselves on the record as being for or against a particular proposition. And I trust that they will know what they're voting on, in part because they've hired people to help them understand the issues. And they will be briefed by those people as to what the issues are, what the concerns would be for the constituents, the folks that actually voted for them. So we'll get back to that momentarily. We're going to pay some bills, and I will not rant about 9/11, but I will have some comments. We'll be back momentarily.
Click, load, listen on the horn. onthehorn.com.
Budwitz and Meyerjack PC is a large Connecticut-based CPA firm with offices in Cheshire and Farmington, Connecticut. Large enough to handle engagements of enterprises with annual revenues in excess of $100 million, yet small enough to cater to smaller businesses and individual clients who expect personalized attention from partners and staff. Client service is the cornerstone of our practice. Our clients have a fixed fee for their audit and tax work. What this means to the client is we're approachable. Personal communication and client services make for strong relationships. Budwitz and Meyerjack, certified public accountants.
Sandits Travel for business and leisure. We'll take you there. Sandits Travel has been proudly serving Connecticut since 1960. That's over 50 years. And we're ready for another 50 years of superior service. Whether you prefer to come in, call in, or log on, we invite you to explore how efficient, diverse, and fun it is to book through Sandits Travel. Save your money and your time with us. Sandits Travel. We'll take you there.
You're listening to News Talk Tonight on The Horn, on onthehorn.com. You can also pick us up on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. We're also brought to you by centralctdental.com. Doctors Camp, Sambor, and Lupini for serious issues or routine checkups. Go nowhere else. Easy to get to on the Plainville-Farmington line. Call 860-747-5761 or make an appointment online at centralctdental.com. We're also brought to you by Deepwater Seafood of Avon. Have you been to the only fish market in Farmington Valley that is fresh? Yes, Deepwater is located on Route 44 in Avon and is open 6 days a week, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. and Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. One of the best things about Deepwater is that they get 3 deliveries daily. That means 8 hours ago, what you're seeing was actually swimming. 3 deliveries daily to meet your needs. Deepwater has a menu of grilled fish items, scampi fish and chips, soups, bisques, and chowders. For your catering needs, authentic paella, cedar plank salmon sides, and always the traditional New England clam bake. Yeah, it's after Labor Day, but I still go for the New England clam bake. Thank you very much. Deepwater also has the very best shrimp cocktail, and I mean awesome shrimp cocktail that you'll find anywhere. Call in your order at 860-676-9657, and they'll have your order ready for pickup when you arrive. Deepwater Seafood of Avon, not just for the halibut. Well, we're back, and there were 2 things that popped up in the last week that I thought were very interesting. One is a familiar face lands a capital gig by Christine Stewart. When he started his new job on Friday as one of Majority Leader Brendan Sharkey's press aides, Gabe Rosenberg became the highest paid Democratic communication aide at the state capitol. With a $100,000 a year salary, Rosenberg will likely step into the shoes of Doug Whiting, who headed the press staff for House Speaker Chris Donovan for 4 years. Whiting's salary, which caused a little bit of a controversy when it was revealed, was $165,000. It is expected that the majority leader will be garnering enough votes to become the House Speaker, which is why they anticipate that Gabe will be walking into that higher-paying job. And then there's Chris Donovan. He may have dropped his third-party bid, but House Speaker Chris Donovan is still working to raise money to pay off what could be about $84,000 in campaign debts. Ouch. That's according to the Federal Election Commission. This story also by Christine Stewart. While it's uncertain exactly as to how much debt Donovan left his failed congressional bid, what is certain is that he's looking to pay it off. We're figuring out what we owe, and we're figuring out a strategy, Tom Swan, Donovan's former campaign manager, said Wednesday. The goal is to pay it off. This is one of the unsung aspects of political campaigns that you really, because it's unsung, you never hear about. I feel for this for Speaker Donovan, and I hope that he's able to get enough money to pay that stuff off, because some of that campaign debt can last for years. There are stories of folks who have had debt for 5, 6, 7 years.
Really?
And no great ability to pay it off. Now, $84,000 is not chicken scratch, but compared to what a lot of folks are paying for their campaigns these days,
oh my God, yeah,
it's not a whole lot. It could have been worse.
It's a drop in the hat.
It could have been worse. Well, I said that I was going to do this. I'm going to do it. I woke up this morning at an early time. It was a little before 7. And I looked out the window, and I thought it was remarkable. The azure blue sky, the crisp fall air, the bright sunshine. And I immediately flashed back to 11 years ago. That day, which, if memory serves me correctly, was also a weekday. It was, I think, in fact, a Tuesday.
I can't remember.
Was a bright, sunny morning. It was a beautiful
Gorgeous out.
day. It was going to be in the mid-70s.
Mm-hmm.
The air was dry, just like today. And then it hit. How things have changed. It's amazing when you think about it, how at 8:46, when the first plane slammed into the South Tower, that people had no idea what was happening. And it was a greater shock by 10:10 when the first building came down. And by 11 o'clock, the second building was down as well.
Mm-hmm.
By that time, an airplane had crashed into the Pentagon. By that time, another plane had plowed into a field in Pennsylvania. What we came to understand later was that that plane was brought down by the passengers. Which is why Vice President Biden, when he made his speech today in Pennsylvania, was truly speaking from the heart when he was talking to the families of what he called our heroes. Biden was able to speak from the heart in part because he too had lost people near and dear to him in a very quick situation. His first wife and his daughter were killed in an automobile accident. So when he was telling the United States in his speech how when a child touches you a certain way, you think of the missing parent. When a child laughs a certain way, you think of the missing parent. You knew that he was speaking from personal experience. And as much as Joe Biden has a tendency of sticking his foot in his mouth fairly often, that he only opens his mouth to change feet, in this particular instance, he got it right. If you go to MSNBC's first read, they will actually have his speech in full. And I would heartily recommend everyone to listen to that speech.
Do they have the video of it as well?
It is
Okay.
it is the video.
Okay.
And it is remarkably non-political. It is very fitting for the circumstances in which it was given. What I would like everyone to remember is what happened in the weeks and months after the awful tragedies that occurred in Washington, D.C., in Pennsylvania, and New York City. What happened was, for a brief time, we forgot our political differences.
Mm-hmm.
We stopped pointing the finger at the other party. We stopped criticizing each other. We were united. We were, in fact, the United States of America. And we knew that there were things that we had to do that were going to be tough. We knew that there were things that we were going to have to work through that were going to be next to impossible. United, we stood. And to this day, we are still the United States of America, but we are a much changed United States of America. We don't take certain things for granted. We don't take flying safety for granted. We don't take traveling safely for granted. We don't wake up every day thinking, oh my gosh, this could be my last day. But that thought is a lot closer to our minds than it ever was.
Very true.
And it would be nice if our political campaigns for the next 50 or so days could actually touch base with that, could actually tap into what we were like when we were climbing out of the dust out of the rubble and putting things back together piece by piece. It would be nice if they could remember that pointing fingers doesn't get us anywhere, that harping on past mistakes doesn't get us anywhere. It's where are we now and what do we need to do to get to the future? What is it that we need to do to get to the next goal? Can we pull together? That, ladies and gentlemen, is what is going to excite the electorate. That is what will reach Republicans, Democrats, independents, libertarians, whatever. Because political parties should not matter. Our first president, George Washington, considered political parties to be an anathema and did everything that he could in his 2 terms as president to avoid the creation of and the fostering of political parties for that very reason. Because he understood that the nascent nation, just having been born, could be torn apart by political partisanship. We are proving that fear now. Perhaps as the best way to honor our sacred dead, whom we remember on this day 11 years ago, perhaps the best thing we can do is to put away the partisanship and look forward together. That's News Talk tonight. I've been joined by Brian Lee. Thank you, Brian. Oh, by the way, what's the score?
1-0. Top of the third.
Ooh.
Leicester. Oh, actually, going in the bottom of the third. Lester's thrown a boatload of pitches. I think he may actually have 6 walks now.
Yikes!
But he's keeping it close. It's 1-0. New York scored in the first.
I will say this in keeping with how I concluded my little rant. The Boston Firemen's Quartet rendered an amazing national anthem. And both the Yankees and the Red Sox were lining their respective foul lines as they honored 9/11. If they can do it, so can we.
So can we.
You're listening to News Talk Tonight on the Horn. We're brought to you by Amazon.com, Gateway Financial Group, Sandits Travel, Sherpa Technologies, Budwitz and Meyerjack CPAs, Deepwater Seafood of Avon, CentralCTDental.com. I'm Dave Moore. Have a good night.